Hi. What we're going to talk about in this video is how to select and implement a control for your organization while also defining control applicability, management, operational, and technical scoping. This video will probably run between 5 and 10 minutes. So my advice to you is to sit back, enjoy the content, and pause it and take notes. So what we've got here are malicious cyber actors coming through. And what do we want to do? We want to deter them to abandon their efforts. Additionally, those who are really persistent are going to get through the deterrents that you put up. What are ways that you deter things in your regular life? You lock your car doors, you lock your house, you put on lights on the outside, you have a camera. There's lots of things you do to make people abandon their malicious efforts. But for those who are more persistent, you need to protect and prevent compromise of the data that you have. And to be able to do that, you have to be able to detect them. And this video is going to help you build detections with proactive, detective, responsive actions and controls. On this side of the screen, we have our controls broken down into family groups. So it's really easy to say, well, how are we going to control information flow? Let's take a look. We've got it in there. We're not going to use this display. We're going to change it in just a minute. But remember, this diagram right here, right? We are focusing on malicious cyber activities. We want to find and select control that deters them, that protects our data and prevents it from compromise. And we want to make sure that the engineering of the control lets us detect it so we can adapt to that malicious cyber actors. If you're not doing this, you're moving too slow, and malicious cyber actors are having a great time in your network. So, what do we need to understand when we get into this? Control applicability for people, process, technology, and data. This is microscoping. So let me back this up real quick. We need to talk about two components of scoping, selecting a technical control. Assessment boundaries, which are macros, right? And your assessment boundary is your security perimeter. That defines what's in and out of scope for all of your systems, applications, and services. So that's one component. The other part is control applicability for people, process, technology, and data, microscoping, right? These are safeguards or countermeasures that are prescribed for in-scope systems. And that's what we're really focused on here. So we're going to trade this view. We're going to go ahead and close out of this window. And now what we've got here is the framework that will let you understand and scope and select technical control, understand the components that go to it. How do we have these controls viewed right now? We have them viewed by the status of the control. We see that these are inconclusive, these are validated, none have failed, 51 are selected, and there's over 1,100 more to choose from. So selecting the right control is imperative. The other thing that's imperative here is to understand that controls can have secondary objectives, and those secondary objectives can be compensating controls for that primary control, or they can become dependencies. When you build a system, you have to understand the engineering components that go behind it. So what if we want to learn more about these security privacy attributes? Attribute values changed by authorized individuals. This control is validated, the priority is low, it was last updated 3 weeks ago. We would define the requirements and project timelines here, along with defining the impact of that control to the business process. Additionally, we could come in here and we could get the updates that have occurred for this control. When you are working in reverse chronological order, say something has happened inside of your organization and you have to backwards plan, right? You might need to know when there were exceptions for security controls because that could be where a malicious actor got into your network. So we have places where anytime an exception is created, it's documented. This is the most important thing that eats IT teams alive, documentation, and this takes care of it. So we see who and when and how long the security control occurred, right? And when the exception was processed. So we see May 21st and May 22nd, right? And we see October 17th. So we have, as an organization, said we're going to make an exception for this control for a particular reason. And that's also a great time to understand how could a malicious actor get into that. Additionally, we see that there's no secondary controls. So good and bad. It depends on the entirety of the system. We have a description of how that control works. Additionally, we also have discussion questions related to the control so that when you set a meeting, you don't go into it blindsided. You know specifically about what questions you want to ask your architects, your engineers, your developers, your C-suite, or bring this attention to your share stakeholders when you need some sort of benefit or asset or resource from them, or they need something brought to their attention. I would not encourage you to show this to a board, but this is the tool that you can use to create that presentation to the board. We still see there's an exception, the duration, and we can see who's been consulted and informed about this control. So if we wanted to learn more about what the knowledge manager is doing, we could dive into that. We have the description of what they do. We have their primary work role ID. We have the impact, right? We can build this out. We don't see anybody on call, email, or evidence. But if we had some evidence related to this control that we wanted to convey to that individual, right, we could come here and push alert, and that's going to send an alert to the appropriate channels that something needs some human intervention. This is the most important thing. We're not going to push the red button. And additionally, we see where they were in the cloud security review. And we see the other teams that the controls that they're consulted for and the controls they're informed about, which is great because now we understand what this role is doing with the control, right? And if we wanted to learn more about it, again, we could dive into that discussion. But we're not going to do that here. We're going to come back. We have really gone a far way. We're at about 6 minutes right now. These inconclusive controls, maybe we're missing some evidence, right? We see that there was an exception processed May 22nd. We have that description, the discussion, no secondary control again. Let's find a control that's got a secondary control established. Right here, access control for mobile devices has over 16 secondary controls that you have to consider for these controls to be effective inside your organization. Remember when you started this video, there was a display of controls and walking through that, right? Think about all of those. These are all programs that require documentation, applications, accountability, metrics, right? We have the requirements, the design, the implementation. We have the cybersecurity framework that's impacted, right? We have our detection engineering with signals, components, and spans. We could generate a report right here. And we also have who's responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed for those roles in clear and accessible language where you could clearly understand what a person is doing inside of that role, how they're doing it, and how they work together with your organization. So, information security systems manager, what are they responsible for? What type of question should I ask this team? Additionally, we could send an update and start a conversation with this team if we had a question, and we could see the people who are on there. We can do our alerting, and we see that this team has nothing that they're responsible, accounted, or consulted for. Again, this is just a demo to walk you through the concepts. And then we also have our selected controls over here. So I hope that you have a good understanding of how to think about a security control inside of your organization, how to integrate, operate, maintain, defend, and engineer those controls if you select a control and you do not assign a quality or quantity metric to that control about how it will be observed and the time and resources that are spent to it, that control is useless. So hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you again.